right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's video. This is the first video I'm filming in a very long time, so I might be a little rusty. Probably been wondering where I've been. It's been probably like 8 months, 9 months, but we're back. 2025, I'm making a reappearance. A couple of housekeeping things before we get into the video, which is my January reading wrap up. I wanted to just preface, obviously, that it has been a while since you have seen me, and that's because last year I just needed a break. I wasn't feeling very inspired to read or film or any of those things. Obviously wanted to come back, figured that I would come back eventually, and what better time than the new year to do that. Also last year didn't read a whole lot of good books at all. Like I read maybe 46 books, I think, and of those, I had like 2 favorites, maybe, from the whole year. Those were Dune and The Women by Kristen Hanna. Everything else I read was pretty not great. It wasn't very fun. It was not a fun year for reading. We're hoping for better books this year. And again, with the new year, I was like, we're gonna read more. We're going to find better books. I'm in the mood to read. I read 14 books this month. So without further ado, let's start talking about January. I read 14 books. Darn it, I forgot to count my pages. Okay, I just quickly added all of the pages that I read in January, and it was 4,769, which is kind of crazy. I did not think it was gonna be that much. I thought it was like 2,000, but I read almost 5,000 pages. Wow, okay, cool, that's awesome. So 14 books, 4,769 pages, 8 new to me authors, and an overall 3-star average rating, which isn't terrible. So I did read a lot in January. Let's start with the first book. A lot of these too I read from the library. I read on my Kindle app on my phone, and some of them were from my physical TBR. Not enough were from my physical TBR, to be honest, because that is a goal that I have for this year, is to read a lot of the books that I already own. But sometimes the library is more tempting to me than the bookstore. I just want to put holds on everything at my library, which is great because I'm not like buying more books, but I'm also not reading the ones that I already own that are a priority for me. So yeah, a lot of these I read, I don't own to show you. So the first book that I read was Never Lie by Frida McFadden. And I love a good Frida McFadden book because they are so bingeable. They're so like quick and easy to read. Generally, they're all hits for me. This one is no exception. This is about a newlywed couple who is house hunting. The book opens up with them visiting the estate of a psychiatrist who disappeared like 4 years prior, and no one knows like where she went, what happened to her. The sketchy part is that this house is in the middle of nowhere, and they end up trapped by a terrible blizzard, and they're forced to take shelter inside the house, even though it's giving creepy. Like I said, this is a classic McFadden thriller that I love. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I read it in less than 24 hours, gobbled it up. I've read a handful of her books so far. I know she has a ton. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. I plan to read all of her books to find like my favorite ones. She does this thing where she lays out the POV, like the different POVs in the chapters in such a way where it makes you think you have it figured out, like you know what the twist is going to be, but in the end they never fail to surprise me. The Inmate was the first book that I read by her, and it did like the exact same thing with similar framework where she makes me think that I've got it figured out, but I still don't. So I think at this point it's kind of a nostalgic feeling for me that I look for specifically in Frida McFadden books. Like if she can pull it off the same way she did with The Inmate, then I'm gonna love it. So like that's kind of what this one did for me too. I never lost interest once in the book. I was invested pretty much through the whole thing. So this was a perfect way to start my reading year and gave me hope for all of the books that 2025 has in store for me. The next book I read was We Used to Live Here by Marcus Klewer. I was hesitant to read this one on the Tales of Never Lie because the premise sounded very similar to me with the creepy, secluded house factor. But however, it was a Goodreads Choice nominee for debut novel last year. So I wanted to prioritize those kinds of books more so this year. Read a lot of what people were loving last year. I was seeing a lot of people love this one. So I decided to pick it up because I could get it from Libby. It's also going to be a Netflix movie starring Blake Lively, which I will be watching. The Goodreads blurb says it's about two homeowners whose lives are turned upside down when the house's previous residents unexpectedly visit, and that's all I'm going to give you as well, because I think going into this not really knowing much is the best way. It was very interesting. It did take a turn that I was not really expecting, and I felt like I couldn't give it 5 stars after that because it just wasn't exactly my taste. But I did love the inclusion of like the secret Morse code at the end of some of the chapters that you could figure out. I either don't know how Morse code works or I messed up somewhere, because by the end it didn't end up making a whole lot of sense. So I had to look it up on Reddit, and it didn't add really anything to the story, but it was still fun nonetheless. So I say give this one a shot if you are ever in the mood for like a wacky horror mystery. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read a classic, and I do have this one physically. Let me just say that timeless is not a word that I would use to describe this book. Also, warning, strong opinions incoming. So next I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Look at this beautiful edition. Don't we love it? That's about the only thing I do love about this book. Unfortunately, I did not love this. It's hard for me to believe that everyone and their mother will love this book as years go on, because the old-timey language in this just made it extremely hard for me to follow or care at all about the characters. Also, let me preface that I was in the right headspace when I picked this up. I was very excited to read it. I was not invested. I was not excited to keep reading. It was more of just a chore to get through. There were some humorous parts in this, but like, it was not for me. I think there's a big difference in the book world between hype and genuine, engaging storytelling. The oversaturation of the former resulted in an extreme lacking of the latter for me. Like, I did not find this very engaging at all. I felt like it was going way over my head, and I didn't like the feelings that it gave me, that it felt like I was dumb. I was not understanding it, because they're like, everyone does love this. So I don't mean to sound like an uneducated hater for not liking this book, like seemingly the rest of the world. I was just severely disappointed in the fact that it wasn't as accessible as I was hoping or assuming it would be. Also, it wasn't even just the writing that I hated. I was constantly asking myself, like, where is the romance in this? I thought it was like the original enemies to lovers romance between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. It hardly felt like about them at all. And I just didn't, I was bored. I was so bored. I may be in the vast minority here by telling you not to read this book, but I just sincerely think it may be time for us to move on from this one. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm so sorry if this is like your favorite book of all time. I just don't understand it. I'm not going to blame it on me. I just think that over time, this isn't going to work for everyone, no matter what people say. So I probably won't be reading more from Jane Austen, but I'm not done with classics. I just don't think this was my type of classic, okay? Don't sue me. Next up, remember when I said I was feeling very encouraged after my first book of the year was a 5-star? Well, it seems I may have taken 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We've got 2 1-stars in a row. If you couldn't guess, actually, I forgot to say, Pride and Prejudice was a 1 out of 5 stars for me. The next book I read was Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. This was not it, okay? This was very graphic and dealt with very real and very serious topics, but at the same time, it felt like it was written extremely young, so it left me feeling very uncomfortable. This was actually also the first Jennifer Hillier that I have read, so it'll be interesting if and when I do pick up more from her, what my thoughts on those will be. But the only difference with this one though, it's very interesting. Not sure what this means, but this is the first 1-star book that has made me cry. So I'm not really sure what that should count for, but I'm blaming it solely on hormones. I didn't like any of the characters. I felt like the twists were real cheap and predictable in the end. I'm not even really going to tell you what this one's about because it's not worth my time. I don't think it would be worth yours at all. So I don't recommend this one. The next book, though, that I read was our first family book club pick of the year. Family book club, still going strong. If you're an OG of my channel, you know we always have family book club picks to talk about. So these are books that I read with like my family, my mom, my aunt, my cousins, my sister-in-law, all the peoples, and it's so fun. That book is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This one actually didn't make me cry. Somehow the one-star book made me cry, but this one didn't. Although I was very emotionally invested, it just didn't bring a tear to my eye at the time that I was reading it. This is a very popular book if you don't know anything about it. It's set in France, the year's 1939, and it's following two sisters' lives in the midst of World War II. It was interesting to read from like France's point of view, like what was going on during the war for people in France. It's wonderfully written, absolutely heartbreaking as always. I think Kristen Hanna books aren't just known for being those two things at the same time always. She is one of my favorite authors, so I really did enjoy this one, and I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5, 4.5. You can round it. I feel like you can round it either or. It depends on the day for me. Like it could round to a 4, could round to a 5, but I think on Goodreads I put a 4. But in my heart, it's like a 4.5. So really good. I definitely recommend this for really anyone. This is a great book for all sorts of people. So the next book I read was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This I don't have much to say about because I have very mediocre feelings about this. I will not be continuing the series because I just was not gripped or like pulled in or invested in the characters' lives. I loved the beginning of this. I had high hopes that it was gonna like be a good time. I didn't realize how mystical the story was going to get, and it dealt with like tarot readings and like just weird like magic-y kind of stuff, which I didn't know because I went into this series blind. I wasn't a huge fan of how this story progressed, and it just like it was like an okay book for me. It was like really nothing one way or the other. The characters were kind of whatever and just didn't keep me invested. Literally, that's all I have to say about that. I give it a 3 out of 5 though, because like I didn't hate it. The next book, however, I did hate. And I'm very sad that I did because I was also looking forward to this one. Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy. I gave this a 1 star as well. A lot of 1 stars this month already. Based on the short synopsis that this book gives you, I really thought it was gonna be something that I would enjoy because it's like, what is that called? That like a secluded thriller. Basically, this man is on a road trip somewhere and he stops at a rest stop and he gets trapped inside the bathroom. Like there's just all these things going on inside and outside of the bathroom that's just horrifying and horrific and all the things, but it's also a novella, so I figured this would be great and easy to read. But there was a lot of spider and snake gore that I don't love. It does absolutely nothing for me apparently because I just was extremely bored. I wasn't rooting for the main character at all. Even though it was so short, I had a hard time finishing it, and yeah, like that's really it. I don't recommend that one. Sad. The next book though I do recommend. I really enjoyed this one, and that is The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This is another debut author, and I was able to grab a copy from my library, so I was really excited. It's such a fun and silly, unserious premise with very mundane snapshots of life and reality. It's magical realism. Basically, the premise is the main character, Lauren, comes home from a night out one night and she's greeted at the door by her husband, which shocks her and freaks her out because she isn't married. She's never seen this man in her life, but suddenly all the evidence around her in her life points to the fact that they have been together for years. It's a very confusing time for her, of course. But then one day, Michael is the husband's name, he goes up into the attic to change a light bulb and then disappears. And then a new man comes down from the attic in his place as her new husband. So she comes to find out that every time these husbands go up into the attic, they come down a different person, and her life is slightly altered as well. So like she has a whole new life with a whole new man and like a whole like history and past like with these men, but she's only seeing them for the first time when they come down the attic. It's very interesting. It was very quirky and fun. Some people's like only critiques with this is that it was very repetitive, but I liked the repetition and I liked the mundane points that the author made. It was definitely my type of like chill read, that it didn't require any brain power. It was simply entertaining and fun, and I thought it would make a good like movie or TV show, and it was great. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I think it was really funny and just so random, but also like genius. The premise, I loved it. I would love to read more like this, like the magical realism of real life. It was really cool. Next up, I read a nonfiction, and that is Consider the Lilies, Finding Perfect Peace in the Character of God by Johnny Artavanis. This is actually written by the pastor of our church, so I absolutely loved this. It was very encouraging, wonderful reminders and biblical insight on how we can have freedom from our anxieties when we ground our thoughts and fix our gaze on who God is. So I highly recommend this if you are a Christian or even just curious at all to learn about theology and the Christian faith. Yeah, so obviously a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I was getting whiplash this month because the next book I read, we have a not so great one. We have another 1 star. And this may be surprising to know that it was a Frida McFadden book. Her newest release, The Boyfriend. This one was not it for me. Frida McFadden usually we're on the same page, but this one she missed the mark. This is about a girl, she's looking for the perfect man, and he is looking for the perfect victim. This is the first and hopefully last Frida McFadden book I give 1 star. It was just so lame and cheesy and not at all what I expected from her most recent thriller. Like I said, she does write thrillers that are easy and super fast to consume, so I did read it in less than 24 hours still, even though I didn't like it at all. I didn't like the main character, I didn't like the premise, I just didn't like any of it, so I give it 1 star. But I will be reading all of her other books because they are on Kindle Unlimited, so I'll be able to make a list of which ones are her best and worst in my opinion, so that'll be fun. Okay, and then the next book I read was Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by McFadden Hendrix. I actually didn't want to read this and wasn't planning at all when I first heard about its release, but then Kayla from Books and Lala announced that it is the first pick for her Literally Dead book club as the book for February, because she only runs the book club from February to November, and I was already planning to participate in that book club. So I was like, okay, well now I gotta read it. And I got ahead of the game and read it already because my library had it the day after its release, I think, as like one of the adult lucky picks where like you couldn't put holds on it. You could only check it out for 14 days. So I figured I'd grab it while I could because there are probably gonna be lots of holds on it later. So this book's synopsis basically is like young teenage girls are sent to the Wellwood home as unwed mothers who are hidden from their families to have their babies in secret, give them up for adoption, and then forget that any of that ever happened. Our main character is Fern, who's 15 years old. It takes place in 1970. It's a large cast of girls, like it's a big group of girls who all have their own stories and backgrounds, but they're all in the same predicament of being pregnant and not married and like in their teenage years. Despite not having any interest at all in this and going into it thinking I was going to hate it, it wasn't that bad. I still only gave it 2 stars, but something about McFadden Hendrix writing for me makes it entertaining. So my rating is strictly based on like the plot and the characters and whatnot, which is typically how it goes for me in his books. I felt similar with the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires and the Final Girls support group. I really didn't love them, but something about his writing makes them memorable in a sense. So I don't mind him at all as an author. I just haven't found a story premise of his that I love yet. So I'm going to continue reading from him, but we'll see how that goes. Next up, we have another nonfiction, The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. This I read over the course of a whole year, but I just finally finished it this month, so I'm including it in this month's wrap-up. I read the majority of it, I feel like, this month because I had taken a long break from it for a while, but this is, fine. I feel like it's nice to have on hand to just like randomly flip to a chapter if you're needing some inspiration, but like reading it as a book, like from front to back, I don't think is necessary. There wasn't really anything in here super groundbreaking. Parts of it I liked more so in the beginning, but it felt really long. Like there was a lot of information in here that I didn't feel like was super necessary. It's kind of a nice book to own and just like be able to reference if need be, but it's not really anything super special. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, but it is actually like really, it would be very quick to read because there's like hardly any words on any of the pages. But like at the middle, it kind of got a little lengthy and I was just like, okay, let's speed this up. We're almost done here. The next book I have is a library book that I still have my hands on. That is The Outsider by Stephen King. This is about an investigation of an 11-year-old boy. His body is found in a town park. It is a brutal, gruesome, very descriptive murder that is very sad because the boy's only 11. So if you don't like that kind of premise, I would say steer clear. But basically, eyewitnesses and fingerprints point to this one guy in the town who is like the Little League baseball coach. He's an English teacher. He is well known and loved amongst the community. Like everyone loves him. So it's very confusing why he would do something so horrible. But it's foolproof. There's no doubt about it because the fingerprints and everything like show that he was there, like at the scene of the crime. Like he did it. He's the killer. But why is it that the investigators come to find out he has a very tight-knit, solid alibi, proving that he was in a completely different place at the time of the murder? How can you be in two places at once, you know? I enjoyed the initial crime and like the public arrest that was made all in like the beginning of this. The rest kind of fell flat for me as the investigation continued and the mystery unfolded. None of the reveals were super surprising to me. It felt very obvious from the beginning kind of where the story was going. So I can't say I absolutely loved it as a horror mystery, but other aspects of it did keep me interested in wanting to finish it for the plot. Like I wasn't gonna give up on it like this far in, you know? I was like, let's just keep going, figure out what happens. I kept thinking like something was gonna flip the story around for me and it would make it interesting again, but it wasn't really. It was just kind of whatever. So this is another 3-star. All right, and finally, I have a book that actually I have not finished yet. I'm very close. Like I have like 4 chapters left, so I'm still counting it because it's only the 1st of February and I'm planning to finish it today, so I'm still counting it for January. I read a lot of it yesterday trying to finish and I couldn't. I got too tired and I fell asleep. But that is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I finally brought myself to finish the first 3 books of the Mortal Instruments. So in December I read City of Glass, and I'm deciding to hop over to is this the Dark Artifices, or this is Infernal? What is it called? Yeah, the Infernal Devices is this series. So I decided to hop over and read these 3 books, and because I'm reading it, I think in the order that Cassandra Clare recommends. So that's where I'm at here. I'm almost done with it. Like I said, going to finish it today. It's feeling like a 4-star for me, but these books are so bingeable and I feel like I eat them like candy when I do read them, and I love the characters. And I think something specifically about like the font that she uses in her books, it just makes it so easy for me to read. I don't know what it is, but I do really like these characters. It's fun to kind of take a break from the ones in the Mortal Instruments. And this is interesting because it's like, what's the year? 1878 London. So this takes place well before the Mortal Instruments, so it's kind of fun to see the connections that are made all the way back then. I'm thinking it's gonna stay at pretty much a 4-star, but I really am enjoying it. So in February, I'm planning to continue this and hopefully pick up Clockwork Prince and Clockwork Princess if time permits. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this, so very exciting. And those are the 14 books that took up my time in January. I feel like I was mostly only reading in my free time this month because I do have a full-time job now. So when I get home from work, if I don't immediately pass out and go to bed, I'm reading. I try to read. I've also been doing a lot of audiobooks because my commute to work's like 40 minutes, so I did a lot of my reading via audiobook, which is nice. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I'm feeling rusty, but I will get back into it, and I will see you in my next video, whatever that may be. Bye.